Thank you, everyone. It's a real pleasure and honor to speak with you today, and thanks to Flown Initiative for facilitating this. So I would like to start by introducing myself. My name is Esteline Dusabe. I'm the Urban Mobility Project Specialist for WRI, and I'm based in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. So I will be the moderator for this exciting session on the intersection between public transport, data, and gender. So after hearing all those discussions with person with disabilities, it's really sensitive topic. So now I really understand how we would really shape the future that is really inclusive, specifically when we talk about public transport. It's really urgent. So thank you, Flown, for organizing this. So we have our 4 very knowledgeable speakers that we'll be hearing from this session. Tuto, the first one will be Tuto, Director and Partnership Event from the Mobility Data. Judith from UN Habitat, Smart Mobility, and also Gada from Urban Mobility Analyst from Transport for Cairo, and Hashta, who she's working on sustainable cities and transport in WRI India, and she was among the speakers from the previous sessions. So those speakers will be each give us a different angle on the subject from the need to integrate women perspectives into transport planning, especially by filling the number of data gap, sustainability aspects of urban transport, and smart mobility. So I believe that this will certainly give us fruitful thoughts, and I'm looking forward to interesting discussion. I will quickly ask each panelist just to introduce themselves. Tuto, please, can you go ahead and tell the audience who you are, just in short, because we are running out of the time.
Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you. And I would like to say thank you to all the people and speakers before us, because everything was so insightful. I'm Tuto, as Esteline said, I'm based in Paris. I represent Mobility Data, the nonprofit organization behind the Open Specification, GTFS and GPFS.
Okay, maybe while figuring out how Gada can speak, we can go ahead and Judith, maybe you can introduce yourself and then you can come back later to Gada.
Okay, hi everybody. My name is Judith Awiga from UN Habitat, based here in Nairobi, Kenya. I mainly work on smart and electric mobility, the intersection of mobility and technology solutions. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Judith. Hashta?
Thanks, Esteline. Hi, my name is Harshita Jamba. I'm the program manager for sustainable cities in India, and I'm based out of Mumbai. And it's been a pleasure speaking on the earlier panel, listening to all of these very insightful sessions, and I'm very excited to see what we have in store for this particular one. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashta. Gada, now you can speak.
I think you tell me. Hi, okay. Hi everyone. My name is Gada and I'm based in Cairo, and I'm a research associate at Transport for Cairo, and I work in the Urban Mobility Lab and map visualization, and I'm excited to be with everyone today.
So thank you, everyone. So we all know, I'm not going to speak about the gender, urban environment issue, specifically with the public transport, that the issue that we are facing. So now we are going to speak about data gap by gender describes how women are historically and frequently underrepresented. So most of the speakers for today, I'm very sure that they were speaking about that, but now with our knowledgeable speakers, we are going to talk more about the data that would be really needed in order to improve the way we work, specifically the women and of course the data that can be needed so that we can have public transport that is really inclusive towards sustainable transport for all. So when we are collecting and analyzing gender disaggregated data can be a first step in creating transport system that effectively serve all members of the community. So it is really very important to have this topic. And with that said, I would like to invite Harshita to tell us more what is happening on the ground, particularly how women as commuters face multiple barriers and how data can be collected and used to close the gender mobility gap, and what are some ways that transit agencies and cities have should be adopted. So over to you, Ashta. You have 10 minutes. Yeah, okay, thanks.
Quick check, can everyone see my screen and hear me?
Yeah, sure, I can see it.
Perfect. Thanks, Estelin. So the session that we have today is the intersection between public transport data and gender. And as Estelin sort of mentioned, we don't have to get into what are the problems. We know that there are many, right? So I want to just get right into a question that does city transport really work for women? And through all of the sessions, and particularly the last one, I mean, it's a resounding no, right? We know that transport systems in cities do not sufficiently cater to women's needs, right? And if you see, I mean, this is something that I always say, it's been decades that we're talking about just safety around women, a safety of women in transport, right? If you see it, and it is all over the world, it's not a particular country or it's not a particular region, but safety for women is something that has always been discussed, and a lot of solutions have sort of there have been a lot of solutions which have been deployed all over the world, but unfortunately somehow we still haven't been able to figure it out, right? There has been this templatized version of solutions that we use, right? Either we have women only transport, or we put a CCTV camera, or we have these helplines, but really have those really worked? We also need to understand that the problem, or why is it that city transport does not work for women, is just more beyond safety, right? We also don't know, one of the problems is that we don't really know how women travel. Now, we know that women step out of the house for work, for education, for a bunch of other reasons. They also have household responsibilities that they cater to. So all of the work that they do have a very huge component of care work, right? Which is not accountable, which is not accounted for in our traditional data capturing mechanisms, right? So we need to realize that women always have complex travel patterns. They have financial barriers, which means that literature suggests that the allowances for commute for women is always lesser than compared to men. Right? They have social barriers. Some of the places they can't visit, or they have to rely on a male counterpart in their family to drop them to a particular place. They have psychological barriers. If someone has seen or witnessed harassment at a particular place or a particular mode of commute, then they would not want to commute through the same mode. And all of these are exacerbated if you have a physical, economic, or social vulnerability, right? So within men and women, you also have women who are physically, economically, or socially vulnerable. All of these sort of complexities are exacerbated, and their travel needs are even different, right? Now, why is that so? I think one of the reasons that we've also talked about through the day is that women are underrepresented in, of course, commuter groups, but also in transport staff, decision-making authority, and almost everywhere else. And the second thing, which we are discussing today, is lack of data, right? We don't really know. There's a dearth of data on how it is that women travel, what are their complex patterns, and what are some of these barriers that they have. Right. So if we were to introduce the gender lens, right, a lot of transit agencies across the world collect data from traditional sources, which is their tickets. All of the commuter data comes from ticketing, and occasionally they conduct commuter surveys, right? But we also have a lot of emerging data sources, right? We have feeds from intelligent transport systems, we have crowdsourcing, we have social media. So a lot of new sort of emerging data sources that are coming in. If we put that to use and just apply the gender disaggregated lens, I think, the planning for transport, we can get rid of those ad hoc remedies that we try and patch, which clearly have not worked. And we, move towards more holistic and equitable transport systems. So once we introduce the gender lens, we have to understand what these differences are, right? Through comprehensive data collection and incorporating gender-specific indicators. This is just an example. Traditional data collection will tell you that men and women use public transport for work, visiting friends or relatives, education, etc. But if you realize a lot of women who are responsible for household work, all of these trips have an element of caregiving, right? And if we add those up, that is the third most common reason why they step out of the house. But if we don't know that, we don't design systems for them, which is what is happening. Right? If we track these and we have these gender specific indicators, we can also track and map the spatial and temporal variations, which can, which is already happening, as we will see. So a lot of these, the social sector took it up, and we used a lot of data. So you've got Data2X, you've got Datapop. A lot of these innovations came up using data to sort of try and safety map for women. This is a safe spot, this is an unsafe spot. This is what a bad spot or a good spot is. So, and it's great to see that after the social sector got this in, it was a sort of a solution. A lot of transit agencies have taken it up, specifically 2 transit agencies in the world. One is the LA Metro, which undertook this whole study to understand how women travel, and the other one is TfL. This is a very refreshing change, and this is very recent, but a lot of these transit agencies are now taking cognizance of the fact that women travel differently. They have to capture it. Only then can they sort of cater to their needs. Right? Now, once we realize and understand what these gender differences are, we have to institutionalize them. It cannot be a one-off affair or a standalone solution, but we need to institutionalize it so that becomes the new norm. And for that, we need to definitely have a comprehensive framework for gender disaggregated data collection. We need to mandate the collection and analysis of gender data. And we need to set up gender strategies within transport agencies to ensure that there's representation of women at all levels. And that was just a very quick context setting for this session. Over to you, Estelin.
Thank you so much, Harshita, for it was very interesting overview of the number of misconceptions in transport planning. So I would directly go to the other speakers just to ask a small question. Tuto, tell me, what do you think, is it really important to collect transit data, disaggregated data? So is it important because of from the planning or from the decision-making perspective? Just feel free to tell us what you think about that.
I think it's for everything, like the previous speaker and the presentation we have just heard. Globally, we are lacking data. And you cannot make any good decision, you cannot make any good plan if you have no idea of what's happening at all. So if you do not start by collecting any data, but not only on the woman usage or how they move around, but also on what are the mobility options that exist, then there is no way that us collectively we can build better and safer mobility options for all the women and all the different vulnerable public that actually rely on transportation to get from A from B. We have heard grueling experience just before from public transit users. And if it wasn't for them telling the stories, we would have no idea of what is out there. And I think that is the message I would like to reinforce before we all go into the digital world and the data world. We need to make sure that we know how to collect sufficient and reliable data to build the system.
Wow. Thank you so much, Tuto, for such insight. I will ask the same question to Judith. So Judith, over to you. Tell us what do you think about the data disaggregated would be important from which side, from which perspective?
Hi, everybody. Yes, I do believe that it is important for us to collect gender disaggregated data, just like has been mentioned, so that if we're to build inclusive systems, if we're to have inclusive policies, number one, it's for us to identify the different needs from the different users of public transport, of different people who need accessibility, their specific, how they travel specifically. In this case, since it's gender, I'll focus on how women travel. So if we can have the data of how women travel, then we can actually make decisions related to the specific needs that come from there. So I do believe that it's very important. Like has been mentioned, and even from the research that I have seen, even as I was preparing for this talk, for UN Habitat, we are the agency that really collects data on SDG 11.2, and it's been really difficult to access this gender disaggregated data related to this. So it would be interesting for us to have discussions on how we could improve on that. Thank you.
I agree. Thank you so much, Judith. Ghada, some question.
Yes, I think it's important, and I think we can all agree, and I can take a word from Tutu if she allows me, which is the idea of a story. I think this segregated data is important because it gives another story, and this is the point that we are looking for, because we know that there is a gap, but the story gives context, and it gives the idea that it's not only about women, it's more about how the women and their dependents and the elderly. So it's a bigger circle than we can imagine. And this kind of disaggregated data gives insight into more than just what we can see. It gives more insight into more groups, and it's important. That is definitely agreed on.
Thank you so much, Ghada. I'm very sure that Harshita, as she already gave us an overview about the data, that's really needed. Just tell us, Ghada, Harshita, what do you think also the data can be very important from which perspective?
Right. So, I mean, as all the speakers before me said, right, I think also women rely on public transport more than men, right? So, which is why it becomes very important for us. I mean, the lack of the data, it impedes transport systems' ability to sort of measure, anticipate, and respond to women's unique needs, right? And that puts them at a greater risk of reduced access to mobility and, just to the city and other opportunities that the city has to offer. Often we say public transport is the lifeline of cities, and if women have a risk of reduced access, then that is something that is extremely important.
Thank you so much, Harshita. So I will go next to our speaker and also asking like specific question to each speaker, as they have different like diversity of the of experience. So Tuto, I have a question for you that I would like you to share your insight about that. So how to go beyond mapping public transport to support better gender inclusion?
So let's take a step back. Why I do love this question, why beyond mapping is so important for me. We have been very proud to support Digital Transport for Africa, the project that Esteline represents and works so hard for, that is to collect and map public transit options on the African continent with pilot cities. But we kept on saying at Mobility Data that mapping is not enough. It's only the first step. It's to know what kind of public transit offers that there is in the city, to know if, for example, the timing, the schedule, the routes, but that's only the first small step. And to go beyond that, to make sure that we build a better and more inclusive system for everyone out there, and especially the women and the families, is to make sure that the data is of high quality and maintain. Because, for example, if we look at a Matatu line, we know more or less from which area to the other area it is going, but the schedule can change, the route can change. And that is important to make sure that we keep having very good quality data before we make a decision. And then a third layer, once we get all of these, is to make sure that we go to all of the speakers that we've heard before us, before this session, all the researchers, all the academics, to localize as much as possible the insights. And as Kara said, to give us the story, because it's based on the story that we can understand why some bus line, for example, or some Matatu options, or even like in some cities, why public transit is not working. And based on that, crossing with the network of the mobility option, I think it's when we actually start building a city, a system, a network that is fully inclusive of all the women, people with disabilities, but also the elderly and even children, if we want them to have one day the autonomy to go from A to B to school, for example, as much as they can and safely. So again, as I said, it's a collective effort, and I'm so honored to be sharing this panel with everyone, because I think that even if it's late in the day for people in Nairobi and for all of us, we need all of this. We need all of our initiatives to come together to actually be inclusive.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tutu, for such great insight that you share with us. We really appreciate that, and I think that's with this thought will help us, to navigate and to know what's really needed from the ground in terms of data towards sustainable transport, inclusive. So I will go to the next speaker. So Judith from UN Habitat. In the short question, in the small question that I asked about gender, about what will be important to collect data. So tell us, in the context of SDGs 11.2, when measuring access, so do you consider a gender disaggregated data, or what, if yes or not? And also, do you have like a complete data to measure it, or there are some missing data? Over to you, Judith.
Thank you, Esteline. I'm wondering if at this point I can do the presentation, or
sure,
just answer the question.
Yeah, you can.
Okay, cool.
At least try to be short, because we are out of the time. You have 5 minutes.
Yes, I will make sure to do this presentation within 5 minutes. Let me put on my timer just for good measure. Great. So I'll be doing a short presentation on the intersection between public transport. So going into my presentation, like I mentioned, we are mainly focusing on SDG 11.2. Oh, sorry, it seems to be moving on its own. So the goal of SDG 11.2 is to make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. And specifically related to this conversation that we're having here, we are looking at SDG indicator 11.2.1, the proportion of the population that has convenient access to public transport disaggregated by sex, age, and persons with disabilities. Something that I just wanted to mention is that SDG 11.2 has now become focus on obtaining data that can help achieve this goal. So now when we're looking at how we calculate the indicator calculation process, the methodology, the first step is the spatial analysis to delimit the built area of cities. Then we look at the network analysis to measure the accessibility of 500 or 1,000 meters to the nearest public transport stop, estimation of the total population in the built up area of the city, and that within the transport accessibility area, and then calculation of the percentage of the population with convenient access to public transport with respect to the total population within the city. So with relation to the discussion that we're having today, which is on disaggregation by gender, we look at how this can be done. Typically, it can be available through household surveys that collect information on both household and individual characteristics and travel patterns. These surveys could be used to collect information about the quality of service, such as the time to reach a station, considering the different obstacles and the wait times. The only challenge is that it's really difficult to obtain these household surveys. I'll be presenting the case of Colombia, where they actually did collect, they have a study, sorry, I want to move this. Okay, anyways, they actually did they did some gender disaggregation related to this indicator. So I'll just go to the next slide. So they actually, this was done by the National Administrative Department of Statistics in Colombia. They looked at a number of cities. Then on the right, you can see these are some of the data sources that they used. And the result of, from the analysis that they had done, this was from the year 2020, they disaggregated the data on age, and they disaggregated the data both from female and male. And then they did a national estimate based on the number of cities that they had gone to, that they had done the study on. Sorry, to move this. So some of the conclusions that they drew from this study was they took into account cities that had formal transportation system, and then given that the cities used for the calculation are those with available information, the national calculation was done by averaging the values obtained from the cities studied. The population data was collected from indicator correspond to the World Population Grid. So it's an estimate, and this was fed into the model builder. So they built a model to include that. So I'll just jump into some of the things that we can see or the way forward as a discussion. So the SDG monitoring methodology has to be simple and universal. Hence, that's why we really focus on spatial access. But as has been mentioned, that mapping is just the first step. So for us to move forward to include this gender disaggregated data, we need collaborations and to get this data and also to apply the gender lens. Because even as we use this data, even from the presentation that I have just shown, a good chunk of the story is missing. So for us to move beyond that, we need to work with different collaborations, and hopefully we can work with Flown to see how we can do better on this. Something that I also wanted to mention is the inclusion of safety, because a significant number of women do not travel because of safety or plan their travel due to taking into consideration safety concerns. So one of the secondary indicators that we are recommending for countries to look at is actually with regards to safety. And with that, I'm just going to end my presentation, mainly focusing on the need for us to build collaborations when looking at collecting this gender disaggregated data and applying gender lens with regard to the analysis of this data. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Judith, for such wonderful presentation. And I totally agree with you that the collaboration is really needed to all partners, stakeholders that are really working towards sustainable public transport, specifically when we say inclusive gender components, like including gender components from the start. So thank you so much again. So I will go first to our next speakers, Ghada. So how can such data collection lead to more just and inclusive projects, raising the issue, and you can talk about that by raising the issue of women underestimated. So go ahead, Ghada, you can share your screen as you want.
Sure. I'll share my screen so that we can look at the answer together. Okay. And you can see my screen and hear me well?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, sure. Now to answer your question, I'll start by sharing a story about a girl. Let's call her Sarah. And this girl is a 16-year-old and she lives in a small city, about 100,000 inhabitants. And the only available education facilities in her city are for basic education. So for Sarah to complete her higher education and to have access to a better job market, you'll have to travel or commute for about 60 to 90 minutes to the closest city. And this is the case of a lot of Sarahs. This is the case of one specific girl in EDCO, which is one of the cities that we have studied in a needs assessment study in EDCO. And this explained a lot about why lots of girls didn't finish their higher education. And a continued pattern of not finishing higher education, not finding an access to a better job market. From there, I'll start by sharing the project in which this comes from. There was a needs assessment study for the mobility sector in 3 cities, EDCO, Asyut, and Alexandria, and specific areas and specific facilities in these cities. One of the tools that we've used were focus groups with women. And what we were trying to do is that we were trying to know a specific type of data. We were trying to know more about their mobility patterns, why they were commuting the way they're commuting. And the most important is that their experiences in the terminals themselves, which is the study area that we were working on. But it exceeded that. We didn't just know these points, but we know now the implications of transit systems on their lives. And we know that now, just as Judith was talking about safety, some women would prefer walking for long distances than actually riding a mode of transportation that is not safe. Some women would move in clusters or groups to avoid feeling unsafe in a street that leads to the closest terminal. So this pattern of how women adapt, not feeling safe, became clear through focus groups. And the time poverty that Hershtel was talking about, how complex the system of mobility is with women, because we have different destinations throughout the day. We just don't go to work and go home. We do several things throughout the day. So the system and the complexity of it was very clear in the focus groups. And the problem and cause and impact analysis helped us to understand that the apparent problem is that women don't feel safe in modes of transportation. But the cause of it would be that taxis are not regulated. The impact of it would be that women cannot ride taxis, and therefore they walk longer distances, and their travel journeys are longer, and therefore time poverty is there. And this has many implications. So the sequence of seeing everything and how the domino effect of the unaccessibility is quite clear in focus groups. I'll end that with the bigger question is, why is it that focus groups helped us see this? Because not only because it gave us a different insight and a bigger story, but also because it gave the women space to share. And this is, I think that this is something that we can all agree on as women, is that the space to actually have a conversation and the space to have a dialogue shouldn't happen on a policy level or a decision maker level only. It is important on that level, but at the same time, the conversation with the women gives them the space and the validation that they felt they could share their stories, and that they had the empowerment to say that they don't feel safe during this and they feel safe during that. This is how I will end it, that how can we think we can build transit systems so that women and girls like Sarah can actually find an access to higher education and to better jobs. I'll end here and can move on to the next part. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ghada, for such discussion and bring out such sensitive issue, specifically when you talk about group discussing with women, you know, because they are the ones who really feeling the issue comparing to others. And as the previous session that I have been participating in, like most of the people who are injured, like who are working in transport sector, most of them are women, are men than females. So they are the ones who really decide for us, and they are not really like feel our unsafe or our issues. So this is really an interesting topic, and we go back to Harshita. Harshita, you had been working with in gender disaggregated data. So now I want you to tell us again about like how have some cities and agencies creatively used gender disaggregated data. You just have 5 minutes as well.
Sure, I'll try to wrap up a little earlier, but thanks for that, Esther. So I think, you know, a lot of these cities are recognizing the fact that they're through, you know, the traditional means to collect data is actually outdated, and the traditional means does not cater to the needs of 50% of its commuters, right? Now, when we look at the new sort of data that is available, very rightly another speaker said that mapping is just the first step, but you also have a lot of cities are now going back to saying that, okay, here we will take a step for gender safety, and we want to go and collect this data. But I think a lot of the data is out there, right? You've got your mobile phones, you've got geospatial data, and you've got the digital trail of social media these days, right? And that can sort of be used, and only if you apply that gender lens, then you see a lot of difference in how women travel, right? And this happened in Latin America, where mobile phone data was used to sort of get a comprehensive understanding of how men and women travel. Some agencies that have, worked in this regard are TfL, LA Metro, for instance, very recently came out and said that, okay, we've been making a mistake. We know that men and women travel differently. We want to find out more. So they sort of commissioned a study on the metro itself, right? And they figured that, these are some of the differences, these are some of the problems that women face. And now what they've done is they've actually constituted a committee within the transport agency which looks at these diverse needs of men and women, right? So that is a good sort of case study, and they're sort of following up on that. They have also invited a lot of, again, in order to get social media data, a lot of cities have actually said that we want to hear stories of harassment. We want to hear stories of harassment on transit data. So they've given a hashtag, and they have encouraged women to actually tweet about it. And while we're talking about gender equality, we also understand that not everyone has the access to tweet, right? But also, if I am doing that, for instance, there's a particular metro station or a particular exit that is troublesome, if I am raising that out, I'm also, if the issue is being resolved, it's not just being resolved for me, but a lot of other women who are using the metro, right? So I think there have been a lot of steps. Mumbai, for instance, with our project, has sort of taken cognizance of the fact that now that they're building the whole metro system, they will consider gender disaggregated data to be institutionalized. So there have been, I think these are some of the cities. I hope the next time we speak, there are much more examples that we can cite. There are much more cities that take cognizance of the fact, and governments that take action. That's about it, Estella.
Thank you so much, Harshita. And I totally agree with you all that specifically when we talk about data and as the one that of the project that I'm working with, Digital Transport for Africa, we are also facing such challenges of the data that are outdated. And also, for example, if you want to take any decision or if you want to improve anything in any perspective of data, you need to have the updated data. So most of the cities and most of, they are really facing such type of like missing data, because even if there are people or there are like some sectors that are really collecting data, but updating is another issue, and also the sustainability of data. So if we really keep like taking such decision or based on the data that are not updated, so we are making a long decision. So it's really challenging, and we really need to speak out this, and specifically when we are going to, to improve for anything, specifically when it's about public transit. So thank you so much for the all speakers. So I have like the last question for you, for each of everyone. I see that I didn't see any question from the audience through the chat, but feel free, if you have any question, you can just drop it through the chat, and then we can our speakers can just answer you if you want, or just feel free to reach out to us after the session. So let me start. Let me go back to Tuto. Tell me just like what will be the recommendation to the cities, to the officials, to government, to policymakers. What will be your final like closing remark for this session, or recommendation that you would like to see in the future? Tuto, are you there?
Yeah, yes. Yeah. I think I froze. I would say that I would recommend for cities to build trust in the ecosystem, so that all the stakeholders, civil organization, association, people working in public transit, people representing the users, but also the urban planners, can actually share the data, share the insight, and know that it will be taken into consideration. And if I may, to make everyone feel better in the room, it is exactly the same message that is being currently discussed in Brussels at a conference for European cities. So we are not alone facing the same problem. It's a global world. Us women, we represent more than 50% of the population, and it's time that we break the silos between continents, between countries, between cities, and we actually learn from each other.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tuto. That's amazing. Yeah. Tell us, Gada, what would be your recommendation?
I think my recommendation would be related to dialogue. I mean, it just keeps being there in my mind. I think having a constant dialogue, and not a dialogue related to just safety, but a constant dialogue that is built with women to find out how to build transit systems that respond to them. Because as Tuto said, there are silos, and there are a lot of silos. Africa is in a silo, Egypt is in a silo. Each city is just suffering in its own silo, and it's becoming a lot of stress, because we all know that we share a lot of the stress. So I think it's time to build just these bridges and to create a constant dialogue that can enable people to actually acknowledge that there is an issue, and then get a step forward and start addressing the issues one by one, because collectively, and I think the word for the day is collectively, is we can find a better solution and an easier one.
Thank you so much, Gada. Yeah, dialogue is key. If we don't really speak out, and I really appreciate the Flown Initiative, because they are the ones who are really pushing us to talk about the issues related to women. So big up to you, Flown Initiative, for facilitating this. And this is the way of speaking out. And please, all women, we need to stand up and talk about any issue that we are facing. So Judith, what would be your recommendation?
So looking at it from our perspective where, we mainly measure using spatial access. And then even from the presentation that I presented, they layered it with population data. I think one of the things that is missing in a lot of this dialogue, even as we present this data, is the stories, the nuance of how women travel. So I think in addition to the dialogue, I would say some of the things we need to be pushing is the stories around how women travel, so that these stories, they give meaning to the data. That would be my recommendation, and that would be what I would push for, more of these stories of how women travel, so that people can actually question, what does this data actually mean? What is it actually saying?
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Judith. Yeah, storytelling. It's also the other key to speak out. Dialogue, storytelling, trust in ecosystems, all those recommendations are really, really very important, so that we can really, really improve and have sustainable transport that are really inclusive. Okay, so Ashta, tell us, what will be your recommendation?
Thanks, Estelin. I think, what I have learned in my very limited experience is that there is no one formula or no one template and no one solution to address this very wicked problem. What does exist, however, is a mix of solutions. Each one of these sort of form a part of the larger jigsaw puzzle, right? Like, for instance, building alliances and coalitions. But I think in the larger scheme of things, we've got social enterprises, donor agencies, and private sector. I think all of these have their place. And in order to achieve equity, I think a cross-sector scale is required, which effectively leverages assets and resources from businesses, from governments, and civil society. That's what I'd say.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ashta. Yeah. I think that's really gave a good conclusion and a good recommendation to our sessions. It's really important to understand how to use right research methodology so that to get the reality on women travel in order to make sustainable urban transport inclusive. So thank you so much, all the speakers. Thank you so much, all the audience that we are following us. So please feel free to reach out to anyone from the speakers. If you have any question, you can reach out, and please tell us. Also feel free to for Flown. If you don't have I don't think that we have shared our email, but any speaker here, you can just put on chat your email address so that anyone can reach out to you and then ask any question that they would like to have. So thank you so much for your time. And I really believe that once the women stand and talk, I really hope that we will be having the sustainable urban transport that is really inclusive. Thank you so much. Over to you, Flown.
Thank you very, very much, Estelin and your team, for leading such a wonderful session, a session that is actually bringing us to the end of this particular day one of our conference, Women in Transport in Africa. It's been a beautiful day. It's been a beautiful time. I think we are learning a lot and we are changing our mindsets. Everybody who's joined us live for virtually and everybody else who's here, what we are saying is thank you so much, or in Swahili, asanteni sana. Allow me to very, very briefly just take you through what we talked about today. And today's session, we deliberated, the deliberations was centered around life experiences of women professionals in the transport sector in Kenya. The various sessions of the day also explored how different users experience the transport systems. Now, 5 speakers gave an overview of women in transport, a session on how open street empower women and lead to more equitable street designs, followed with presentations from 6 speakers. The rest of the day was focused on current situations in transport in regards to inclusivity, touching on women cyclists, persons with disability, and the intersection between public transport, data, and gender. We'll definitely give a more comprehensive report tomorrow morning as we open day 2 of our Women and Transport Conference. Thank you so much again for being here with us. Now, allow me to